Hi, my name is Jose Morales, and I'm here to talk to you about corporate social responsibility and corporate philanthropy. I want to ask you one thing. Does donating to poor countries actually help? Sounds harsh, right? But keep in mind there's a big difference between disaster response and longer term, more effective, sustainable development. Much of the time, in terms of long term development, outside assistance and donations don't have much of an impact, and they can actually be harmful. Now, when people see images of impoverished countries and people living in situations and conditions that we're not used to here at home, our first reaction and thought is to help, to donate something, give them money, give them something. This is a noble thought and shouldn't be dismissed. However, many people fail to realize that most of the time donating to the poor leads to a vicious cycle of dependency and poverty, and as in some cases that I'll note here, can actually leave the communities in worse conditions than they first started. This isn't an anecdotal argument either. Recently, international development projects funded by foundation and public sector money have increasingly conducted assessments to philanthropy efforts and charitable efforts before and after snapshots, if you will, of the communities they're intended to help. And what they found is that many of the times the plans implemented aren't well thought out and fail. One of the reasons for this is that many of the communities can't sustain the things that are donated to them. There's no reason and no point for an external agency to come in, put in a well, for example, pass it over to the local community if they can't afford to maintain it over the next 10 or 20 years. There needs to be proper assessment of just how much the local people are willing and able to finance these water points. It's not enough just to drill it and walk away. In 2007, for example, before African Medical and Research Foundation and Farm Africa began their development work in Katyn, worms were found in a polluted water supply at the village of Abia next to the Imuru Swamp. A badly constructed and poorly maintained shallow well dug by a charity was a source of soil and animal feces that was making a lot of people sick in their water supply. The charity that dug the well, well intentioned as they may have been, failed to answer these questions. Who is going to maintain that well? Are they going to come back every 3 months to check the water supply? Are they going to stay in contact and make sure they have the supplies needed to maintain the water well? Is the local community well equipped and trained to maintain the water well? Do they have the resources to get the parts they need to fix the water well if it ever went bad? The answer to all these questions apparently was no. Perhaps no other better example of international aid producing unintended harmful consequences was UNICEF's efforts in the 1970s to provide drinking water to Bangladesh by drilling deep bore wells. At the time, no efforts were made to test the aquifers for contaminants such as heavy metals and such. It wasn't until the 1990s that a man visiting his family in Bangladesh was concerned by the increased frequency of skin lesions he was finding and other health effects that were experienced by the locals. He had the water tested for heavy metals and discovered that the water contained high levels of arsenic. Authorities in Bangladesh and parts of neighboring India are still now to this day struggling to develop adequate water filtration systems to remove arsenic from thousands of wells that were built by such organizations. But millions of people have no choice but still rely on these wells for drinking water and other needs. The fact is, special attention needs to be paid to post-project development of the initiatives that they are supporting. On the analogy that no investor would spend money and forget about it the moment it's spent. Philanthropy can play a leading role in reversing the trends that are creating a healthy environment throughout the world. Every funding agency can start by pledging a Hippocratic oath like doctors do. Before they do any good to try to help somebody, they have to make sure they're not going to do any harm. Another analogy is no family would buy a dishwasher without figuring out if they had a place to put it. If you don't have a cutout in your kitchen for it, why buy a dishwasher? It's just going to sit in the middle of the kitchen and be a nuisance, right? Now, there are what are called environmental impact assessments that are routinely performed by governments for domestic programs, and international lenders use it for large infrastructure projects. These assessments are used to identify and mitigate environmental damage before projects are even undertaken. Very few of these charitable organizations and philanthropy organizations use these assessments before they start any efforts. That's a big problem. The requirement to carry out these environmental impact assessments that many financial institutions perform are going to be needed in order for these philanthropy efforts to be successful. As the old Chinese proverb or philosopher said, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. You teach him to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Thank you very much.